Last lecture, we talked about an individual firm in perfect competition in the short run. This lecture, we're going to extend our discussion of perfect competition a little bit. We're going to talk about how short-run profits or losses affect markets in the long run. We're going to talk about the concept of sunk costs, and we're going to talk about how short-run shifts in the supply or demand curve translate to the long run. So I want to remind you about what our individual firm is going to do in a market, competitive market in the short run. If the market price is greater than the minimum average total cost, the firm is going to make a profit. If the price is between the minimum average variable cost and the minimum average total cost, the firm will operate, but it will incur losses. And if the market price is below average variable cost, the minimum possible average variable cost, the firm will shut down. So we can turn these rules into a supply curve. Here's our ATC, here's our AVC. So we can turn these rules into an individual firm supply curve. So here's our average total cost, here's our average variable cost, here's $2, which is our minimum average variable cost, and here's the bottom part of our marginal cost curve. And remember, these are our three regions. The green region, firm's earning a profit, middle region, firm is producing but incurring losses, and the red region, our firm is not going to produce. So basically, as long as the market price is above the minimum possible average variable cost, so it's the price that corresponds to this minimum part on the AVC, our firm's going to produce, and how much it's going to produce is going to be determined by the marginal cost curve. Below this price, though, our firm is not going to produce anything. The firm is going to shut down in the short run. So we can put all of our firms together into a industry-wide supply curve. So if we have firm A, which is Mr. Plow, this is how much Mr. Plow is making. Firm B, which is Plow King, run by Barney, this is how much Plow King is making. The market supply curve, we can add up our individual supply curves and come up with the total amount that will be supplied in this market for a given price. So the total that would be supplied in the market at the price of $10 would be 8 by Mr. Plow, 20 by Plow King. That would be a total of 28. So prices, especially when we go from the short run to the long run, will act as signals and will signal to people and entrepreneurs whether they should get into this market or not. So positive profits in the short run send a signal to people that they should really enter the market. Negative profits or losses will send the opposite signal that resources could be doing better in other markets, so some people will leave the market and go and decide to do something else in the long run. So if we look at an individual firm in the long run, this is their average total cost, their supply curve is going to look a little bit different. So anytime that the market price in the long run falls below the minimum possible average total cost curve, the firm's going to dissolve and go do something else. So a firm's going to produce nothing. So our supply curve in the long run starts at the minimum possible average total cost curve and goes up. Another way to think about this is, I said in previous lectures that in the long run, there really is no such thing as an average fixed and an average variable cost curve. All costs are variable. So that means that the average total cost curve is the exact same thing as the average variable cost curve. So you could think about this minimum price here as being minimum average variable cost. Below this curve, which is zero profits again, the firm's going to go do something else. And it can do this because in the long run, all costs are variable. In the long run, you can completely shut down, sell everything, go do something else if you want to. So in the long run, if price is greater than average total cost, the firm makes a profit. If price is equal to average total cost, the firm just breaks even. If price is less than average total cost, then the firm should shut down and go do something else. So one important concept that we can think about this is the concept of sunk costs. So when firms are deciding whether or not to shut down in the long run, they may be hesitant to do so because they have invested a lot of money into their business, but this is something that's called the sunk cost fallacy. So kind of other ways to think about this is there's no use crying over spilled milk, water under the bridge. All of these are different ways to state the sunk cost fallacy. So money that has already been spent and that you have no control over, that's not a factor that should play when you're deciding whether or not to go out of business. So think about this. Waiting in the food court and been waiting in line forever at McDonald's, and there's no line at Hardee's next door, but you say, well, we might as well stay in the line at McDonald's. We've already been here for 15 minutes. Well, that doesn't make much sense. You've already spent that time waiting at McDonald's. That's not time you can get back. Okay, so now we can really start to look at what's going to happen in the long run. So here's our average total cost, and here's our marginal cost. And what we're going to see is that in the long run, prices are going to adjust in our market so that the price is going to be just equal to the place where the ATC crosses the MC, places where firms make zero profits. So you can see that what this is going to translate to is basically a horizontal supply curve for an industry in the long run. So the industry is going to produce however much you want it to, but it's going to be at this price. So what's going to drive this? Well, we're going to see that it's going to be firms entering or exiting the market. But one thing to keep in mind is profits go to zero in the long run. That's what we just saw in the previous slide. So why would you join an industry if you know that you're going to make zero profits in the long run? Well, remember, we're talking about economic profit, not accounting profit. So if economic profits are zero, accounting profits are positive. Economic profits include all of those implicit costs that accounting profits don't. Okay, so why do profits get driven to zero? Well, if firms are making positive economic profits in the short run, then new firms are going to enter. So profits are a signal that your resources are better used in this industry. So what's that going to do? That's going to shift the market supply curve to the right. The price is going to fall until profits are zero. So we've got this great animation of what's going on here. So here's our market in the short run. And on the left, here's our individual firm. And I just want to quickly remind you that these graphs, on the y-axis we're looking at price, x-axis we're looking at quantity. Right here is my single representative firm in this market. On the right here, this is the market as a whole. Okay, so in the short run, here's the market price given by the intersection of the supply and demand curves. So the intersection of the supply and the demand curve in the aggregate, that sets the market price. This individual firm just looks at the market price and then makes its decision. Okay, so in the short run, you can see my little firm here is making profits. The price is up here. So the price is above the minimum average total cost. So the firm's profits would be given by a rectangle that just goes like this, right here. So what's going to happen in the long run? Well, more firms are going to enter the market. So what's that going to do? It's going to shift the supply curve out, and more firms are going to enter the market until the price in the marketplace is just equal to the minimum possible average total cost, this intersection of the marginal cost curve and the average total cost curve. So at this point here, my firm is making 0 profits. There are no more incentives for other firms to enter the market or other firms to leave the market. So what happens? Well, my individual firm produces a little bit less because the price it receives drops. But as in the aggregate market as a whole, the aggregate industry produces more. What about the opposite? Well, if firms are making negative profits in the short run, then some firms will exit. So that exit will continue until firms are just breaking even. So how does this look like? Well, here's our setup in the short run. So in the short run, the market price is given by the intersection of the supply and demand curves, and here that is below the minimum average total cost curve of my single firm, and let's just say it's above the average variable cost curve, which we can't see here, so my firm's producing something here. So in the long run, firms are earning negative profits in the short run, so some firms are going to exit. That's going to shift the supply curve to the left, and that's going to raise the price, and that's going to happen just until the price reaches this minimum average total cost curve here, and my firm is going to produce more because its price rises, but the industry as a whole is going to produce less. So you can see that here the industry was producing here, some firms exited, so the industry is now producing here. So all this goes back to one of the assumptions that we talked about way at the beginning of perfect competition, and that's free entry and exit. So industries with free entry and exit, other people can enter the industry or exit the industry very easily, and that is what will drive profits to 0 in the long run. So what happens if something else in the marketplace changes? So here we've got our market set up. Here's the price intersection of the supply and the demand curves, and that translates to my individual firm over here. Well, what happens if something shocks the demand curve? So something shocks the demand curve in the short run, demand curve shifts down over here. Well, now we have a new price here, new intersection between the supply and the demand curve. So in the short run, my individual firm is going to produce less. So the price moved down here. We've got a new intersection between the marginal revenue and the marginal cost curve. So my individual firm is going to produce less. Well, now we've got a situation that looks like what we just talked about. Now in the short run, firms are earning negative profits. So in the long run, what's going to happen? Well, here's what we had just before. My firm's earning a loss. Well, if firms are earning losses, then some of them are going to exit. So here we have that the supply curve is going to shift to the left here, and is going to shift. Again, firms are going to exit until we get back up to our original price. So what happened here is that we moved from point B to point C, and that means that my marginal revenue curve for my individual firm moved back up to where it was before, so my individual firm is now producing exactly what it was before. All right, so one last small point. We've been talking about the long-run supply curve as being perfectly horizontal. There's some reasons why you might think that that might not be totally true. So we might have limited resources like land, and you would still have the opportunity cost of labor. So if you're expanding your production, you may have to raise your wages. So the supply curve may not be perfectly horizontal.